Good afternoon, everyone. Daniel Breton here from the Electric Mobility Canada organization. I am the president and CEO. I have the pleasure to talk today in a one-on-one conversation with Tim Grant. He is a candidate from the Green Party of Canada. He is a candidate in Toronto in the University Rosedale riding. Good afternoon, Tim.
Bonjour, Daniel, and merci pour ton opportunité. Malheureusement, pour moi, mon français reste mauvais. I must also apologize in advance for the likely interruption of this recording because the Canadian military jets are flying over Toronto, as they often do, in preparation for an air show on Labor Day that traditionally happens at the Canadian National Exhibition on the waterfront. So if I pause briefly and you hear this huge whooshing sound, please appreciate it's not someone in my household.
Okay.
In any case, sure, I thank you for inviting me to say a few words before we do the questions. And I thought, it would be no surprise to those listening to this session, either now in the live version or later on, that Greens have, of course, been long-time advocates of electric mobility as a key part of the transition to a green economy. I was a federal candidate for the first time in 2019. There were many propositions then in our platform related to electric vehicles. There are again this time. I'll say a couple of words about that. But I wanted to say, really sort of set the larger stage of how EVs fit into our sort of transportation vision. For example, because we are in a country that really has very little passenger rail, we have almost no bus service between towns, let alone between cities. And so, it's really a big part of our transport platform is the notion that we need to be supporting bus transit between small towns on the hourly basis so that people can get to a doctor's appointment in the next town and get back in the same day. And that buses are given a second mandate, which is to bring people to Via Rail stations so that Via Rail can run more and faster trains. I was a provincial candidate a couple of years ago for the Green Party here in Toronto when the issue of road tolls was a big issue, and we advocated, supported the City of Toronto in their request for the province to authorize road tolls, and all the other parties opposed that. And I say that only because it's important as part of the larger vision to be that ultimately we have huge congestion problems in most of our major cities, and we're going to need to adopt some forms of road pricing, whether it's tolls or other mechanisms. So that people can actually have real mobility rather than being stuck in traffic. We're also advocating as part of the transformation, the electrification of the economy, a very kind of a significant ramp up of retrofitting of all buildings, small and large, in every community across the country over the next 10 years to replace gas furnaces, and oil boilers are still being used with things like air source heat pumps, and creating millions of jobs across the country. And lastly, I would say, as someone, as Daniel mentioned, I'm sitting here in downtown Toronto. I think it's really important that the electricity that we use is green electricity, and we have this huge opportunity province by province for collaboration between provinces. And we in Ontario, for example, should be doing, as many US states are doing, which are tapping into Hydro-Quebec's surplus electricity and doing what Denmark and Norway do, where when the wind is blowing in Denmark, the dams in Norway stay shut and vice versa. And that's the way to end up with a fully renewable grid that can support the electric transportation that in all sectors that we want to see. So a couple of words then just about our platform. I was unable to send it to you, Daniel, when you requested it the other day. It hasn't been released yet, but I did get a peek look at it just last night, the last version before it appears on Monday. And there were several features that are notable. One is, of course, that we would extend
Well,
subsidies.
don't go too fast, Tim. I'm going to ask the question, so you'll have plenty of
Okay, well,
opportunities,
I'm happy to hold off and tell you about that as we get into the
exactly,
questions.
if you don't
That's
mind.
great.
Okay, perfect. So, well, I mean, let's start with the three fundamental reasons why Canada should support the development of the electric mobility sector. There's air pollution and health, obviously. When you look at Health Canada report that was released this year, I mean, the economic cost of air pollution is $120 billion a year, and people tend to forget that. And a significant part of that comes from transportation and oil and gas. So it means that if we transfer to electric mobility with renewable energy, I mean, we will save billions of dollars. And we're talking 15,300 deaths per year because of air pollution, and we will save thousands of lives. So that's the first reason. The other one is obviously climate change, because we want to fight climate change. And when we look at the data from Environment Canada related to climate change, well, greenhouse gas emissions from transportation is actually going up. It's not going down. And I think we're on the verge of having transportation surpass oil and gas as the first greenhouse gas emitter in Canada. We're at 26% now with oil and gas and 25% in transportation, but it's actually growing faster in transportation than in oil and gas, believe it or not. And the last but not least is jobs, because there is a great opportunity during this energy transition to create jobs in Canada regarding electric transportation, whether it's for cars or buses or trucks, any modes of transportation that can be electrified. Canada is very well placed to be a world leader. And now people, I think, are starting to understand that. So that's why we at Electric Mobility Canada are very pleased to have these in-depth conversations with party representatives. And so we'll start with question number one for you, Tim. Is the Green Party in favor of the creation and deployment of a comprehensive Canadian electric mobility strategy that includes a ZEV supply chain strategy in order to create sustainable, high-paying, high-quality Canadian jobs across the country?
Absolutely. And we appreciate that supply chain starts from mining, as well as manufacturing of batteries, as well as electric car manufacturing. Absolutely. And we said more about it in our platform in 2019, especially because where we really need the work to be done, and I've not seen much progress in the mining sector since, is to develop environmentally sustainable ways of getting important battery minerals out of Northern Ontario, places like Northern Ontario that are poorly developed at this point, and done in a way that is done in cooperation with and the support of First Nations in those areas.
Okay. Does the Green Party have a plan to develop and ensure Canadian access to strategic minerals in an environmentally respectful way? For instance, right now, 99% of lithium which is being extracted in Canada is sent outside of the country.
Yes, well, obviously we favor made in Canada solutions, and it's obvious both from not just from an economic standpoint, from a climate standpoint. You don't export the minerals that you really need to be using here in Canadian manufacturing of electric vehicles. So absolutely, do we have a plan per se? No, we don't. But we do. Our role really as a small party is to advocate for what's necessary. I think when we have many more MPs, that'll be the time to really be presenting a full plan. At this point, our role is to push whoever is in government to develop such a plan and to point them in the right directions of what components need to be in a plan.
Okay. Does the Green Party have a plan to develop value-added transformation of strategic minerals in Canada?
No, we don't, but we are obviously in favor of it, and we're in favor of it throughout the economy. Canada has in general been exporting way too many raw materials, and so we have advocated since day one for the processing of raw materials in Canada, and where needed for exporting the processed materials that are needed by the countries that are receiving those materials so that we are creating jobs in Canada. And that would be the same template we would apply to the manufacturing of, the extraction of the minerals, the processing of minerals, the use of the minerals here in Canada, and the manufacturing of there's a whole range of industries associated with the manufacturing of electric vehicles, whether they be school buses, passenger cars, light trucks, etc. The Canadian automotive industry has a surprising array of suppliers that supply parts and technology, and now software, of course, is a big part of any new vehicle. So we appreciate that there's an elaborate supply chain that needs to be, some parts of which are already in place, but there's really has not been the government leadership to put the whole ecosystem together that we need to ensure that investors will step up and fill the gaps where parts of the supply chain are not in place. I know that our provincial Green Party has been lobbying the provincial Ford government to really start getting serious about getting those the minerals we need for the transition to electric vehicles from within our territories, our provincial boundaries. And so, I think we have to keep pushing, as let me just say.
Okay, just for you to know, in a few weeks, EMC will be part of a group that will launch the Canadian ZEV Supply Chain Alliance called the Accelerate Alliance. So that's what a group of organizations from across the country are working on right now.
I'm delighted. That's great.
Now let's talk about light-duty passenger car or trucks electric vehicle purchase incentives. Is the Green Party in favor of offering light-duty vehicles purchase incentive rebates to stay as they are now on the federal level, expand the rebate to include more EVs, or raise and expand the EV rebate, or lower the rebate, or not at all?
No, I think there's a couple of things there. As you know, that there's another issue in behind all of that, which is how many rebates will be allowed in a given calendar year. And we saw that the federal government had, through the enthusiasm of Canadians for electric vehicles, had exceeded the amount that was allocated last year. And so it's important to really stress that we need more available rebates, quite apart from the amount that you're asking about. So we think that the rebate is for new EVs, passenger cars, of course, is what it's currently limited to, is adequate. We think the provinces, as many have already done, need to jump in as well. But we think it's really short-sighted that it does not include, it should be extended to used electric vehicles as well. And some provinces have picked up on that point. And we need subsidies for electric bikes, which can be a game changer in urban settings. And we have Canadian manufacturers of electric bikes here too, and they should be supported.
Okay, so you are saying that you would agree that we need to keep the rebates like they are now. Is that it?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think but we also need to. You also asked me, which I did not respond to. We also need to extend them to light duty trucks, for example. Not just passenger vehicles. Electric light duty trucks have enormous potential in the economy. For contractors on building sites to be running all of their tools, once those contractors take them home, if there's a power outage, to power their houses. I heard recently that the Ford 150 Lightning could have kept Texas houses up and running with electricity for 3 days. So it's really important to be encouraging and to providing subsidies for a whole range of electric vehicles.
So, the second to next question was, are you in favor of offering used electric vehicle purchase incentives? So your answer is yes, obviously.
Absolutely.
Okay. So another question, are you in favor of offering specific electric vehicle purchase incentives for lower income citizens and families?
Yes, and I was really glad to see that question in your survey. I said no to a couple other questions that are related to this, but yes, I do. And I think that's one of our challenges in the adoption, especially in a time in Canada when we have such inequality of incomes of people that we don't generate resentment that rich people are taking advantage of subsidies that poor people can't. And so indeed, I think it's really critical to have a kind of a means test, frankly, that makes it easier for low income people to get into used or new electric vehicles. And we all know that with the increasing range of electric cars now on offer, there is a great range of prices, and that will only increase. That range from the most expensive to the cheapest will only increase. So it becomes really appropriate to be offering special incentives to low-income people.
Okay. Are you in favor of HST exemption or adjustment for the purchase of light-duty electric vehicles?
Absolutely. In fact, it's part of our platform that there should be no sales tax on either the sale of used or new electric vehicles.
Okay. Are you in favor of a fiscally neutral fee-based system to help accelerate the transition towards greener vehicles? For those in the audience who don't know what a fee-based system, it means that there is a fee for gas guzzlers that finances EV rebates. So the system pays for itself. It may include exemptions for people who need bigger vehicles that are not yet available in an electric version for big families, workers, or farmers.
So that was one of the questions I said no in on the survey. And I think that, again, it relates to my concern about sensitivity. We already went through an issue here in Ontario where it was proposed that HOV lanes, access to those lanes be available for hybrid cars initially, and then it became electric cars. And there was a real pushback from low-income residents in my downtown neighborhood who just said, hey, we paid for those highways, why are we losing access and being squeezed into the lanes with the commoners? And I picked, I think we have to be a bit sensitive about that. And I think we want to make sure that everyone understands that the electric vehicle, that the adoption of electric vehicles, even if each of us can't afford to do it, some of us can't afford to do it now, serves all of our interests, not just in improving our healthcare by reducing air emissions, but the fact that the more people adopt EVs, the lower the price is going to come down. And I was involved with a big project promoting solar panels 14 years ago, and the systems that went on rooftops in my neighborhood were expensive. And now they're dramatically cheaper because there was a mass, we radically increased, not this neighborhood alone, obviously, but we radically increased the number of solar panels and solar panel manufacturers, and now the price came down. So I think that's the dance. It's in a way we have a dance with public opinion that we need to stay on the right side of and can't afford to be on the losing side or to have resentment about special treatment, as I mentioned earlier, for those who can't afford EVs and not. So I tend to oppose fee baits on gas guzzlers at this point. I used to in favor of it, but I think in retrospect, we've come to be more cautious in regard to that. The Green Party platform doesn't have a statement one way or the other, but that's my view as the transport critic.
Okay. Is the Green Party in favor of offering medium and heavy-duty electric vehicle purchase incentives?
Absolutely. I think where we start getting into medium and heavy-duty vehicles, we're moving into a realm where it becomes more important, I think, in a sense, to have governments, have procurement policies and public agencies to have procurement policies, whether they be municipal transit agencies, whether it's Canada Post in their fleets or government's own vehicles for a variety of purposes. That's, I think, the stronger point. We're certainly in favor, of course, of subsidies of all electric vehicles, but we think that government leadership is needed once governments convert their fleets of vehicles to all electric. It really accelerates the transition across the private sector as well. And so that's the role that government can and should be playing.
Okay. So are there any other policies or programs that you would support to accelerate the deployment of medium and heavy duty electric vehicles, such as bulk buy or financing support from the Canada Infrastructure Bank, infrastructure installation support, or any other policy?
Absolutely. I will say that while we didn't want to add a fee bait to gas guzzling cars, we do think it's important to have to offer money to retire those gas guzzlers, and that's been a policy.
Like kind of a scrap it program?
Exactly.
A green scrap it program per se?
Yes.
Okay.
And that's important because it's an incentive for people to get rid of their gas guzzling cars, and it's a particularly incentive. Often people have second and third cars that are older, and so we need to help provide that kind of incentive. We also think, as does your organization, that all public ferries that carry cars and passengers across public waterways across Canada need to be electrified by 2030. But we've also advocated more at the provincial level than nationally. It doesn't appear in our platform, but certainly the support for electric school buses, electric transit vehicles. We have manufacturers here in Canada that nothing will help them get international orders more than providing helping them get ramp up production through domestic orders. So those are a couple of things that are kind of top of the mind for us.
Okay. Now let's talk about micro off-road mobility, like bikes and scooters and motorcycles and snowmobiles and recreational boats. So is the Green Party in favor of offering incentives for such vehicles in their electric form, obviously?
Yes, and I think I spoke about electric bikes already, which I think, by the way, will be, it's the one, and the listeners won't know that you and I, Daniel, spoke a month or two ago, because I lead a project in downtown Toronto with 26 neighborhoods. We're doing many bulk purchases on electric vehicles and on home energy retrofit products and services. So we've interviewed all of the major bike shops here in Toronto that sell electric bikes, and learned about which companies in Canada manufacture them. And whereas most car owners are aware that there are electric cars out there, most bikes and car owners don't know about electric bikes. So we have a lot of education to do. And I think education, we haven't spoken of that yet, is a big part of what's needed for a successful transition in general. I think ATVs and boats are certain. There's no reason boats are really good in ATVs, because they're both types of vehicles are parked most of the time, are ideal candidates for electrification. It's the same with school buses and even municipal transit buses. They're parked most of the day, and thus the ability to be recharged is quite easy. It's not the same as like long distance trucks that are on the road all the time. That they're a more challenging target for electrification. So we're absolutely in support of that. We don't say so in our platform. It's I take that as my responsibility as the transport critic to bring that forward at our next policy conference, and I will be doing so because we need to broaden the scope of it. But we're certainly in theory in support at this point.
Okay. Let's talk about infrastructure now, because obviously we need more electric mobility infrastructure. So is the Green Party in favor of rebates for the purchase of electric vehicle chargers in existing residential or commercial buildings or workplaces? And we have a number of section here for single-family homes, multi-unit residential homes, commercial places, or workplaces.
Yes, absolutely. So yes, they do, as your association and your members are acutely aware of, we face enormous challenges in this. Not only is it in part because in our own neighborhood, we're really quite engaged in, we have an electric charging, vehicle charging committee that are looking at specific properties, that are talking to the Toronto, our municipal utility, our city council, and the manufacturers and distributors of electric charging stations to say, to figure out what's the economics involved, and get the property owners okay, get the institutions on side. All of your members know how challenging that can be to bring all the players together. And one of the challenges, of course, is that, and the reason why my answer to your question is yes, which I haven't said yet, is because we know that what electric vehicle, let's say passenger electric car owners, are prepared to pay to recharge their car in a fast or a slow charge doesn't really cover the cost of the chargers at this point in time. That's our understanding. And so we think public subsidies are critical to really launch a widespread use of chargers. And I can tell you, in our downtown Toronto community, where lots of people park on the street with a permit from the city government, that's the big question people ask us as we've started promoting electric vehicles is, where the heck can we do it? And so that's why we're invested in finding off-road locations where people can book time on an app through the charging company's equipment and have access to a fast charge. I have to laugh when in the survey, you asked whether we favored a 50% subsidy or a 75% subsidy. And in the middle of doing the survey, I immediately flipped the question to my net zero carbon committee, and especially the members of the electric charging committee for their feedback. And eventually I answered 75 because, again, we're still in early days of kind of trying to understand the economics. But if it needs to be 75, it needs to be 75.
Okay. Now let's talk about rebate for the installation of electric vehicle chargers, because it's one thing to purchase the charger. It's quite another to install the charger, because many homes that are, let's say, 40 years old or older might require more work and more money to be able to install the chargers. So are you in favor of rebates for the installation of those chargers?
Yes, I am. And, again, it has to be part of it. I don't think it's going to take a lot. I mean, most people, basically need to have about 50% of those in our neighborhood do have access to backyard pads or garages that already have electricity, but they don't necessarily have the voltage so they need to, and they may need to upgrade their electrical panels. So I think that, but we're also, as part of our committee, I can say this because we're looking at, housing retrofits, and clearly we need everyone's going to have to upgrade their electrical panel to be able to get off gas for heating and water heating and cooking. And so, we're going to need broad support for that. And I think that's the best place to do that, to make it easier. And even starting with, we have a low income program that we've been working with the city to promote. And I think that we might want to sort of be integrating that sort of support for those who are least able to afford it, but really that would become yet another barrier to even a used electric vehicle.
Okay. And are you in favor of modernizing building codes to help accelerate EV charger installation?
Absolutely. It's clear from our conversations with our local utility called Toronto Hydro that they're very aware of the challenges. They face problems with the Ontario Energy Board. This won't be of interest to people outside Ontario, but it's an example, I think, of the challenges we face across Canada, whereby Toronto Hydro is not allowed to spend any money that isn't directly related to their current distribution and sale of electricity. So we're now lobbying the city council to allow Toronto Hydro some latitude, since the city council owns the utility, to allow Toronto Hydro to get into the game of providing this kind of supporting this infrastructure, and so that we can cross the threshold and have provide those that need it with real access. I'm not sure if I quite answered your question, but
No, you did. Well, is the Green Party in favor of investing in the deployment of public level 2 charging infrastructure? And that's where we come up with a 50% or 75% of the fee for charger and installation. So we're not talking residential, we're talking public chargers. So is the Green Party in favor of investing in the deployment of public level 2 charging infrastructure?
Absolutely. And I'm sorry to continually say yes. That sounds like I'm a broken record, but we are the Green Party after all. But we recognize that public infrastructure is critical. It's not just on private property, whether that be in condominium, the basements of condominiums and parking lots, or in being garages of private homeowners. It is, and that's kind of why I was saying that we're already looking at our own neighborhood for particular locations where there are multiple car parking lots that are perhaps privately owned, but where the owners, the institutions that own those lots would be open to having 2 of the parking spots dedicated for the charging station and the place where the car would park. So and the city of Toronto is experimenting with trying to put chargers at the edge of the sidewalk rather than on someone's front yard and having to run a cable across the sidewalk, which would be an impediment to many pedestrians. So it's quite challenging, and that's why it's really important to have public support and public subsidies at this stage of the game.
Okay. So are you in favor of investing in the deployment of public fast and super fast charging infrastructure? So we're talking a whole different level here. So we're asking, yes, are you in favor of 50% of the charging infrastructure fee or up to 75% of the charging infrastructure fee?
Well, I'm prepared to go either way. And I think, as I said earlier, just to be completely transparent, it's not clear. And I'm involved with a neighborhood project that's engaged in this very issue. We don't have a real sense of the costs yet. And so if we need to be, if it calls for 75% support as opposed to 50, obviously we would support it as the Green Party.
So we could have a discussion after this campaign. We could have a discussion with our members on that particular topic.
That would be, I would welcome that. And because the Green Party is going to continue to need to speak on this post-election.
Yeah. Let's talk about regulation now. Is the Green Party in favor of a federal light-duty zero-emission vehicle mandate? If yes, would it be 100% sales for light-duty vehicles by 2030, by 2035, by 2040, or not at all?
We are indeed, like the passenger cars. We feel that a 2030 target is an adequate deadline for the end of sales of combustion vehicles. In other words, that we're only going to be selling used and new electric vehicles, and clearly that needs to extend to light duty trucks, which are a crucial part of the economy for small businesses and for individual tradespeople. So yes, we think given the number of companies that are now bringing forth light duty electric trucks and the many more that are just waiting to be going to be released in the next year or two, we think 2030 is a realistic target. And it's better to be, frankly, it's better to be a bit ambitious than to have too little ambition in this regard, because we know that if we don't push governments, it's not going to happen.
Okay. Actually, the members of EMC supports 2030 target.
Great.
Are you in favor of a federal medium and heavy duty zero emission vehicle mandate for 2035, 2040, 2045, or another target, or not at all?
I can't say that we've discussed this with particular dates. We have the one corner of the answer I could give you that we have talked about is, of course, a green freight initiative. That tends to be more about urban freight distribution, which has big impact on air quality in cities, and where the opportunities to really change the modes of transportation away from larger diesel trucks to smaller vehicles, electric vehicles, and then to cargo bikes, in fact, in downtown cores. So that's tend to be where we've focused. I as the transport critic, I'm on every listserv related to transportation, both electrification and sustainable transport, and every public policy organization that distributes their policy pieces. I think I'm all for the fastest acceleration towards electrification. I need a little bit more evidence. I think a party would need a bit more evidence that the sector is ready for, that we can realistically put target dates on the end date of the sale of internal combustion heavy duty and medium duty trucks.
Okay. Let's talk education and training now. Do you support the financing of national education and training campaigns for citizens, businesses, and employees to help accelerate the transition towards electric vehicles?
I do, and you may not know this, Daniel, but I spent my whole life in education, both as a high school teacher, but also 25 years, the editor of a magazine called Green Teacher, which still continues. I'm no longer, I'm more of a figurehead now in that organization, but we've done a lot of articles about the importance of school districts at purchasing electric school buses, for example. And we have plans. I was talking to the editor the other day, big plans to do a lot more of that. I think I want to take you on a tangent, if I can indulge you, if you'll indulge me for a moment. The David Suzuki Foundation had celebrated about 8 years ago their 20th anniversary, and David Suzuki crossed the country. And actually, when he was speaking in Montreal, he was asked by a reporter, what would you do? Would you do anything differently if you were starting over? And he said, what we would do is we would have focused on education. We didn't think we had enough time 20 years ago. We thought we had to keep pushing governments on to do very specific measures. But what we missed was the importance of education. And I can't underline that enough. People need the education, and that's part of what, for example, in our own program in downtown Toronto, our net zero carbon initiative, 50% of what we're doing is education. It has to be. We have to constantly educate people about the alternatives, the advantages. Not everyone's ready to adopt them right away, but that's okay. That's what education is. It's a long-term investment. It gives people a sense of the horizon that we need to aim towards, some of whom are going to be able to jump to that horizon sooner than others, but we need everybody to see the horizon, and education is the way to make that happen.
Okay. But the other part of the question is training campaigns or training programs as well, because in the short term, for companies working in electric mobility, they need workers, and they need to either train or retrain workers who lost their jobs in other sectors. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, in Ontario, which I'm more familiar, we have a community college system, and that's generally where the job training for programs for, mechanics, for electricians, for technicians, for electrical technicians, the kind of people who are going to work on electric vehicles and maintain them and so on, it takes place. And so I'm seeing the beginnings of that in some programs, but again, that's where government leadership is needed. In Canada, we have a patchwork of, the provinces are responsible for transportation. The national government tends to stay out of it, except with a few broad mandates that we've already discussed in terms of EV subsidies. And so that really makes it challenging in Canada compared to other countries, that we have to get the provinces on board to really drive the process. Because once education institutions get the message from their provincial and federal governments who fund them, that this is where we're going. And for example, just the fact that now political parties, including ours, have come up with mandates for ending the sale of internal combustion engines, that alone sends a signal to community colleges, who are generally very responsive in Ontario to, starting to develop the training programs that are needed for the next generation of jobs and employment, so that we have people available to step into those roles.
Thanks. Interesting. Does the Green Party support adopting an electric fleet procurement policy for the federal government?
Yes, I think I spoke a little bit about that. And we have so many agencies. There's not just direct government agencies, but also independent agencies like Canada Post that have quite significant annual fleet procurement policies. And again, most of those vehicles don't run 24/7. They are they're parked most of the time, easily electric vehicles. They're
And-
often parked in centralized facilities where charging stations can more economically be installed. So yes, absolutely. We think that's really what's going to help accelerate the transition to electric vehicles, is if the federal government commits to federal procurement policies.
Okay. Is the Green Party in favor of other incentives such as federal ferry, HOV lanes, and non-other financial incentives? If so, what do you have in mind?
Well, I think I mentioned HOV lanes already, and we of course support 100% of electrification of passenger and truck ferries across Canada by 2030. I think beyond that, though, the federal government really can, the one question we started with, which is a tough question because we haven't made much progress, is on the mining sector and the incentives for the mining of the critical minerals that are going to be needed for domestic battery production. I mean, we do, as you say, already manufacture some of them and export a lot of it, but I think that's where we need is that the incentives, and there's, your association and others have pointed to the kind of, the sectors that are going to need support. If we're going to have there are many parts of the vehicle supply chain, just to take electric vehicles, that are involved in that have to be in place, not just the manufacturing of the final vehicles. And so we need the federal government to be supporting organizations and associations and individual companies, providing opportunities for economic development for the establishment of the facilities that we do not currently have, but are needed to round out the supply chains and ensure that we have, a made in Canada solution at each stage of the production process.
Thanks. Very interesting. Let's go now to a question from one of our members.
Okay.
So it says here, I'm curious to know more about your position regarding fee-based programs, knowing that fees in those types of programs generally only apply to new vehicles, and government can draw a line in the sand whether it wishes to determine what is a gas guzzler and apply exemptions on vehicles that do not have a zero emission equivalent. Why would the Green Party not consider this option to apply fees on gas-powered supercars or highly polluting luxury vehicles?
Well, I actually like the way you've rephrased the question, because we did address it earlier, and I think there is an angle that I did miss. What I was concerned about earlier, I think I stated in a concern more broadly, but I think there's no question that because the question is a smart one, let me say first, because it acknowledges that what's happened in Canada in the last couple of decades is the move to much larger and more powerful, much larger vehicles, much larger and heavier trucks. What are called light duty trucks are often not very light. And so, whereas, I'm old enough, and perhaps you are, Daniel, to remember back in the 70s, when the Arab oil embargo dramatically increased oil prices, Canadians were particularly responsive, more so than Americans, in switching to smaller cars. In other words, the price signal worked. So in that sense, I'm certainly in favor of fee-based on extreme gas guzzlers. I think that certainly makes sense. And I'm happy to have the question rephrased, because we need incentives for people to go to more efficient vehicles. And whether or not they're electric right away, okay. But a fee-based on gas guzzlers is going to send a powerful signal, put a powerful signal in the market that for all kinds of health and economic reasons, including people's individual pocketbooks, we need much more efficient vehicles, low emission vehicles as much as possible. And that anything that helps send a signal to the market that it's time to end the reign of gas guzzling vehicles and trucks is a good thing.
I don't know if you know this, but there was a study published in 2019 by the International Energy Agency that calculated that Canada was the #1 country in the world for greenhouse gas emissions per kilometer driven from its light duty fleet.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of room for improvement.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, before we finish this interview, do you have any other ideas, policies, or thoughts that you would like to share with our members?
Well, I think, first of all, I alluded to this at the beginning, that I particularly appreciated as the transport critic, as someone who's invested and consumed with all manners of issues related to transportation. I was very impressed with the level of detail in the survey. You know, as a candidate, and this is my 5th election, you get lots of surveys all the time. I'll fill out 30 or 40 before this very short election is done, but I might have done 60 or 70 in a regular election. But rarely did one questionnaire do such a deep dive into all of the ingredients that are needed to help get us through the transition to, you know, electrification of all forms of transportation. So I found myself, as I said, as I was going through it, making note of various things that we need as the Green Party to start sort of fine-tuning our platform and our policies in the years to come. So I tip my hat to the association, and we'll be following your reports with interest in the months and years to come. But appreciate your leadership. It's much needed, and we're here to be supportive.
Well, thanks a lot. That's very appreciated because we work very hard at EMC to get our members and our government relations committee to talk to all parties, all level of governments, to make sure that, you know, they see the opportunity and what needs to be done. So that's, I mean, you talk and you work on you're dedicated to transportation and green transportation. That's what we do as well. So after this campaign, I mean, if you want to have a conversation with us, with our members, it's going to be more than welcome.
I would love that. Thank you very much. Appreciate the interest, Daniel.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Thank you very much, Tim Grant. And we hope you have a good campaign. And for our members, well, this was our conversation with the Green Party of Canada with Tim Grant. And next week, we will talk to representative from the NDP, Liberals, and the Conservatives. So stay tuned. Thank you.